darlings. It's Ellie of Earthcraft by Ellie Apothecary. I have this week's Tarot Monday Oracle / Tarot card. And what do you know? We pulled the Empress for this week's energies. The Empress in the Tarot rules Taurus and it rules Libra. Both archetypes of beauty, values, and yes, money. And it's interesting that we pulled this card this week because Venus in Aries just went retrograde within the last couple of days. What does that mean? Well, first I'd like to make one more note that the moon is in Taurus today. So we be feeling those Taurian vibes quite strong. And if you're wondering how you're going to feel this, you're like, but I'm a Leo sun sign. You'd be like, that's cool. What's your Venus placement? And then what placements do you have Libra and Taurus in your chart? And then if you really want to get nitty gritty, you can go, what kind of aspects do I have with Venus in my chart? Oh, okay. And if you want to go a little bit deeper, you can go, which houses have Libra and Taurus in them in my birth chart? You see, astrology is very deep. And if you look at these readings or astrology or archetypes through the lens of that perspective, if you understand what the placements mean, you can go really deep into understanding yourself. Not everybody is patient enough to do that, but if you're doing the work and you're curious, you're probably very fascinated by this idea. It's actually how I watch tarot readings, and when you're working with spirit, either as a spiritual person or just in your practices, or you're new to the idea of spirit, everything is energy, right? And there's part spirit guiding us to where we need to get to go, where we go. If I stumble over my words or slur my words at all, it's because I'm starting to channel. I've noticed that's something me and other intuitives do. So I don't know if anybody else has noticed that, but I just thought I'd mention that because I kind of tripped on my words there for a second. Where was I at? I have a few different messages today, like Spirit wants me to channel, they want me to talk about astrology, they want me to give this weekly tarot reading for the collective. So I've got a lot of different topics that I could speak on, so just hang in there and we'll see where we go. But we were talking about spirit, right? We were talking about how one works with spirit. And if you're familiar with Tarot Tube, you know that if you're a spiritual person or whatever, if you know how to use your intuition, you will be led to the right videos at the right time, which is what these readings are, is timeless. And confining yourself to timelines actually limits your potential greatly. So when you're watching these kinds of things or learning this esoteric knowledge, it's good to look at it from different perspectives. It's kind of like the opposite of what a reader does, which is take an objective view of potential multiple people in the collective subjectives views. So there's a way of looking at it through the lens of Libra, which is ruled by Venus. of looking at things in a balanced way, of seeing all sides of a situation before making a decision. And that's how we use discernment, right? So Libra is air, Taurus is earth. Air is masculine energy, so despite Libra being ruled by a feminine planet such as Venus, they are a masculine elemental sign. They're also a cardinal sign. What does that mean? It means that they start off the season of fall. Like other cardinal signs, they start the season with the dates where that zodiac sign is on the calendar year, right? So that's usually the fall equinox. And Libra, representing balance, is right there in that level space of equal night and day. The same thing is happening soon with the spring equinox. And again, the equinoxes can vary as far as their astrological significance. They can vary on where the sun is positioned in the sky each year. But I personally go by the wheel of the year. I go by traditional Celtic calendar scale. And this was created originally by farmers and pagans. So the whole point of it was to honor and celebrate the different cycles of life and to work with the gods or energy or the land through these different rituals and practices around the year. So if everything's in balance with Libra, you look at Taurus, the earth energy. So Taurus is very grounded, very stable, very secure. We're talking about positive, generalized astrological traits, okay? I will tell people again and again, there are evolved versions of every sign, and how that sign operates in your chart depends on where it's placed. So one thing you should know about me, if you haven't checked out my other videos, is I do talk about my subjective experience with astrology. And a lot of astrologers are against that, but I don't really care. See, I've got conjunct Venus and Aries and Mars, so I kind of do my own thing. And considering Venus is in Aries retrograde right now, well, we're all reviewing how we do our own thing right now. So, retrogrades are all about reviewing all the re's, okay? Everybody knows about, not everybody, but a lot of people understand the concept of Mercury retrograde, and we're not going to get all into that right here. We're talking about Taurus, we're talking about Libra, we're talking about astrology, we're talking about tarot. So, anyways, Taurus is values, right? So you could say that Libra is more intellectual values and principles. Like you see a lot of the justice system expressed through Libran principles. And Taurus is more about like family values and security, and it being an earth sign, it's a very 3D sign. But earth signs are all feminine energies. So they're very receptive. And Taurus is a fixed sign. So, I mean, they're the sign that gets the reputation of being the freaking stick in the mud. Okay? They're as fixed as it gets when it comes to those energies. And a fixed sign is in the middle of a season. And Taurus is right on April 20th, right after the spring equinox. So spring equinox happens in Aries, which is Libra's polar opposite. But that's also a balanced light and dark spectrum of the year. Now we're talking right now in the northern hemisphere. I'm sharing from the Sierra Nevadas in Northern California. So I don't mean to exclude anybody who's on other timelines, but y'all know how this works, right? Right. If you're wondering, I am listening to my instrumental playlist on Spotify. You can find me under Earthcraft by Ellie. I curate a lot of things. Speaking of Taurus, I have a Taurus moon and I have a Taurus north node. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my subjective experience, because I find that by relating my personal experience, other people can learn more about their own. So I have no problem leading by example and explaining the light and shadow of my astrology in reference to other people. I do also offer readings for that, so if you want me to go into your astrology, links are in the description box. So Taurus values, it's stuff of substance, and on the shadow side it can be being too attached to material things. But on the positive side, you can look at it as being the mundane that connects with the spiritual, because the polarity axis of Taurus is Scorpio, and Scorpio is the higher wisdom of spirit in eagle form, or phoenix form, or dragon form. Those are the higher octaves of the scorpion. The scorpion is very much still the mundane aspect in astrology, but it's the opposite of Taurus, you see. So that means it's the common spiritual principle, as above, so below. It's the grounding of spiritual information, and you see that expressed through the Hierophant card, which a lot of people, I've noticed, tend to limit the potential of the Hierophant card, which is ironic because it's all about expanding spiritual knowledge within and teaching, kind of similar to the Hermit card, which is ruled by Virgo, which is also an earth sign, but expressing it out. It's the spiritual leader in the community. It can also represent gatekeepers and hierarchy, but I look at it more from the perspective of a spiritual teacher. And that is something in my personal chart I realized I had, that I've been developing and growing into over the last few years. But I'm always a student first. If you wonder where I get my knowledge from, well, first of all, I'm an elder millennial, okay? So I remember books. All my astrological wisdom was not gained by watching YouTube videos, okay? I'm just vintage enough to understand what it means to go to a used bookstore or a library, or if you were lucky at the time to be able to buy a bunch of books at Barnes & Noble or Starbucks, whatever, then you could, or if you were smart like my friends and I were back in the day, we'd hang out at the coffee house and just read books for free. Sorry, big box stores. Nope, not sorry. I preferred used bookstores, but anyways, that was more about the hunt. So a lot of my knowledge is through books, right? Traditional, actually going through, like, really studying stuff, right? Not just having it given to you. And as we're talking about spiritual wisdom, and me being a Taurus moon and a Taurus north node, which is all about my destiny, right? Talk about misinformation and how it can very easily be spread by not reading from original sources. Now, some people would argue that in order to become a spiritual teacher, you have to have a spiritual teacher. But not everybody's path is so straight and narrow. That's too linear, okay? If you want to talk about the higher principles of spiritual beliefs and leaders and expansive knowledge, we got to get into the zone of Sagittarius. Sagittarius rules the 9th house, and it rules higher learning and knowledge. We're not talking about that today, okay? So you're probably wondering, what does this have to do with the Empress card? Well, I'm helping you understand what the Empress represents, okay? So we have both masculine and feminine energies in every person. And when you come into balance with those energies, you represent a certain status quo. And when you become an empress or an emperor, you become the master of 4 queens or 4 kings and the emperor. Like, it doesn't get much higher than the empress and the emperor as far as the status quo in the tarot. Okay? The empress represents the fertile earth goddess, okay? She's the eternally pregnant, fruitful, rich, restorative, nurturing, loving, grounded, comfortable representation of divine feminine at its best. Of course, we could talk about the negative aspects, but right now we're going to talk about these positive traits, right? So if you look at that in a 3D perspective, we're looking at it from the perspective of material wealth, comfort, satisfaction. So yeah, to pull the Empress card for the collective is a good sign. It's a great sign of empowering that Mama Earth grounded, fruitful energy. But it's also about our ideals. And if you think about Libra and the beautiful ideas and the aesthetic that is cultivated from Libra through language, it brings on a slightly different meaning of the Empress card. And it's interesting to bring that up because with Venus being in Aries, its polar opposite, and it being in retrograde, being under review, what we value, what we're attracted to, what magnetism we have within ourselves that's expressed outward, what kind of relationships we have, and also what kind of relationships we have with spirit. Because if you're going to get into the intellect, and you're going to get into spirituality, and you're going to look at the mundane, you're going to look at all these aspects. So I ask you, collective, how are you talking to yourself these days? You see, Taurus also rules the throat chakra, even though people would think that Gemini rules it, because Gemini is the next sign in the zodiac, okay? And it rules communication and all those kinds of things. So, yeah, sure, Gemini, which happens to be, by the way, the polar opposite of Sagittarius, which we were mentioning earlier, which means it represents lower knowledge. And that doesn't mean to put Gemini down, but they do rule gossip, okay? So if we were to look at the concepts between higher wisdom and lower wisdom, that would be that spectrum on its shadow form. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about beauty, we're talking about values, we're talking about language, we're talking about the throat chakra and Taurus ruling the throat chakra, okay? So how do you speak to yourself? How do you speak to others? How do you express your values, your desires, your worth through your words? And how does it affect yourself, your identity, your own authority? Do you give your power away by, constantly saying nice things to other people, but never really asking for nice things yourself? Just think about that for a second. You're going back to the Empress card, right? And in the tarot, she's she is the Queen of Wands. She is the Queen of Swords. She is the Queen of Cups. And she is the Queen of Pentacles. So we got water with cups. We've got air with swords. We've got wands with fire. And we've got earth with pentacle. Okay, that means that she has gone through the levels to be in the status she's at. She's earned her way up, which Taurus principles are known for being persistent, having longevity, working very hard at something steadily, being grounded, being in the 3D, continuing to grow. Like, I think another good representation of Taurus would be like the Eight of Pentacles card, because it represents that consistent working towards something that you're building, right? So the Empress has built an empire. She's obtained her wealth for a reason. And by mastering these four queens, which, by the way, are above a knight, and they're above a page, there have been quests, there have been trials, there have been tribulations. And we have to all go through these things. The same thing is seen through the Emperor card, the divine counterpart of the Empress. The Emperor owns its domain. They delegate. And an Emperor is known as a masculine card, okay? It's ruled by Aries, interestingly enough, right? You see the split of the Libra-Aries polarity axis between the Empress and Emperor cards. But both fire and air are masculine principles. And every king embodies air energy. And every queen embodies water energy, earth energy. The Emperor and the Empress, they all contain all energies, right? But they've all earned their way. You know, in the masculine principles, you see the page, the student, going and learning the information, just starting their quest, being a little wary, kind of like I'm getting glimpses of the Sword in the Stone, right? The Disney classic version of the Sword of the Stone in cartoon form, or whatever you want to call it, animated. You know what I'm talking about. So you start off as just like not knowing a lot, but being very eager and like excited and moving forward on your quest. Then when you get to the night, it's like, okay, you've picked up a little bit more skills, you've journeyed, you've battled, you have some wisdom that kings have, but you're not quite at that rank yet. You haven't fought the big boss yet, so to speak. And when you get to the king, you have mastered the quest. You have accomplished the journey. And now you rule over your domain. Well, an emperor is the embodiment of every quest and every challenge and every different aspect of the masculine principle. And you could say that the Empress is the feminine. And as many readers are now saying, it doesn't matter what gender you identify with. We're talking about energy. And that's hard for people to conceptualize for more than one reason that we're not going to get into today. So everybody, to be in balance, and I say this astrologically too, is to embody the polar opposite of that which you feel you represent in order to become a whole. You know, like yin and yang. Everybody knows that concept, black, white, masculine, feminine working together, right? And becoming the whole. Well, you could say in order to master your sun sign, for example, using astrology, you would want to learn about your polar opposite sign of your sun sign and how they're expressed, and then start integrating certain traits from the opposite sign in order to fully represent the shadow and light of your sign, plus evolve into another polar opposite aspect of so. It also gives you a lot of humility, compassion, empathy for other people to put yourself in the perspective of the opposite, right? This is how we learn. This is how we evolve. I've been doing this since for over 20 years. I'm gonna go longer than that, okay? I just had a big milestone birthday, that's all I'm gonna say. So I've been doing this since I was a kid, and my interest in astrology started from wanting to understand people, wanting to observe people. So I didn't learn in a traditional fashion. I didn't learn through tech or videos or whatever. I looked at a book, I studied people, I made notes, and I was very analytical. I was also highly interested in psychology at a young age, which I never went to school for, but I've always studied and been fascinated by the mind and the psyche and emotions. If you check out some of my advocacy work on my channel, you'll get to understand a little bit more about emotional intelligence and recovering from childhood trauma. We're not going to get into that here, so don't click away, okay? What was I saying? Of course, the Moonlight Sonata comes on my playlist. I used to play the song on the piano a lot. So, okay, so childhood, speaking of. Yeah, so you learn how to study people and you realize how much it can actually help you. And when you understand how astrology goes beyond your sun sign, you can see how different pieces fit. And you can actually get into what's called predictive astrology or electional astrology. And predictive astrology is pretty much where you look at future transits and timelines, and you can use electional astrology in the same way, where you look at kind of guideposts in time that reflect the positive experiences in different parts of your chart, and you can plan to make different big moves based on what's going on in your chart. Or you can go inward with it and you can go, oh, okay, so this is highlighting this part of my chart this month. Maybe I'll focus on integrating that part of myself. Okay? It can be used inner or outer. You can astrology is a tool. It's not a belief system. It's not a religion. It's not crap. It's been around for thousands of years, and it started by people observing the cycles of nature and human behavior. So you can see how it's very closely tied into psychological principles. And it's actually really fascinating. I have seen a lot of psychologists getting into astrology to help their clients better, which is phenomenal. I think that's amazing. I mean, you look at parapsychology, which has been around since the late 1800s, early 1900s. And you look at our system of understanding the collective consciousness and archetypes because of Carl Jung. I just finished reading his final published book, which was Memories, Dreams, Reflections. And it was him looking back over his life and the different things he'd written. It's really fascinating. If you're interested, I recommend reading that. If you read nothing else of his, check that out. And he talks about different perspectives of the world from his travels. And anyways, I don't know where I was going with that, but I just thought I'd throw that out there. So in the same way that you can learn from different aspects of yourself through astrology, you can do it through tarot and through oracle with spiritual guidance. You can do it through prayer. You can do it through meditation, through yoga, through channeling, through art like singing or painting, If you want to go really deep into the woo-woo, you can practice automatic writing and get into like journal prompting, and like there is no limit to the possibility of self-exploration in this world. If anybody tells you that their ideologies or their principles or their spiritual systems are the only way to succeed in life, you should probably use your discernment. For everything I channel or I mention or I speak on about, half of it is spirit and half of it's life experience. And I've had to go deep within myself many times in my life to obtain the knowledge that was very difficult for me to obtain. And I was never seeking it, not consciously. I was driven to understand it. There's a fire within me that drove me. And there's a fire in every one of you, which, speaking of Aries and Emperor energies, and I feel it's necessary to bring this up because I have reviewed these energies having, again, a conjunct Venus in Aries and Mars in Aries, and Mars being the ruling planet of Mars, Aries-Mars connection, okay? Which is all about power and passion and how you take action in life and how you assert your will, right? Like an emperor executes their will. And I'm saying their or they or them instead of he or she. We understand there's masculine and feminine principles, but I'm intentionally being gender vague here. I'm also an advocate for queer folk. And side note, and I may get some clicks away, but I don't care. I don't talk about this on a wide platform because I'm private about my family life, but I'm a single mom of a genderqueer child. I have an NB child, and I love them to pieces, so I use they, them a lot, and it's okay if we don't have to go down that rabbit hole. I'm not trying to preach to anyone, I'm just letting y'all know that I'm very aware, and the way I speak is a little different than other people because I advocate for children and other minorities who identify differently, okay? So, saying an emperor, they, them, whatever, we're just using that for brevity's sake, okay? Because I identify as a female. I am, for the first time in my life, I can say I represent the Empress card. I am the divine feminine, but I had to work very hard, just like the Empress card represents, to be in that position, to represent that energy, just like the Emperor. The difference between the Emperor and the Empress is obviously the difference between receptivity and action, okay? And when you've had to be a Page of Wands, and a Knight of Wands, and then a King of Wands, in a feminine identity, you learn to master the Emperor energies. And the reason I reference to my personal chart is because my placements in Aries are in the 10th house of mastery. And guess what we just did, folks? We just went through about 3 years of Aries North Node action. We all learned about autonomy. We all learned about toxic relationships and codependencies. And we also learned about the toxicity of being overly independent. Okay, I've briefly talked on this on other videos before. A lot of people might get a little impatient with the way I talk or channel, and that's okay because I am cultivating my community right now, and I'm calling people who are interested in hanging out and having a chat about these kinds of conversations. I don't do things in a linear fashion because the concept of the world being linear is false. And I said a quote, I have a clip of it somewhere on one of my playlists, about that just not being the case. We don't live in a linear world. And the quote goes, we don't actually live in a linear world. The only thing linear in this world is a straight line. Now, for those of you that understand physics and other things, you might laugh at that, but that's the whole point. It's meant to be philosophical, it's meant to be thought-provoking, as a lot of my wisdom is. And something you should know about me is I have claircognizant psychic abilities, which means I tend to receive information as a psychic medium from spirit, from a higher power. And it's information that I didn't really understand how I had access to it. So these are things I'm learning to master in my life from a different perspective. Now I'm being drawn to mention also that the North Node, our destiny as a collective, is in Pisces and has been for a month now. So it's the time to look into mysticism. It's the time to look into esoteric teachings. It's the time to go deep into the subconscious. You see, a lot of people associate Cancer with the moon because, well, it's represented astrologically as the moon glyph for Cancer, the fellow water sign to Pisces and Scorpio. But Pisces in the tarot is ruled by the moon. There's also Piscean connections to the Hanged Man and also the High Priestess. But as far as the moon goes and the tides and the ocean, you see, Cancer may be the ocean, and Pisces is the depth of that ocean. Okay? So there's a lot of depth that we are into as a collective. And there's a lot of shadow aspects of Pisces that people like to talk about, but we're talking about the evolved version of Pisces. Okay? And I am a Pisces sun sign, I am a Pisces Mercury, I am a Pisces Psyche, and I'm a Pisces midheaven. Okay? This is my domain. And I have spent years learning the Virgo Hermetic energies to balance my midheaven. And I'm finally in a place in my life where my esoteric knowledge is bubbling up. And this is how I am showing up for the collective now, by putting myself out on this platform, talking about these subjects, helping people understand how to work with these energies. It's part of my path, okay? So I'm really, really fascinated to continue to talk about these things in any which way I please. I typically don't edit, but, I'm open to this channel evolving down the road and having somebody do those things to help me edit and whatnot and grow my channel. But when I started this channel, it was meant, which, by the way, was just in October 2024, so I'm still a YouTube baby. But I started this just to have an outlet, right? And that's how a lot of creative projects start, is wanting to express. And that loops us back into the Empress energies of beauty, of aesthetic, right? It's not just that, it's also about the earth. It's about, you could go into, it's herbal medicine also. That's another thing I do. I work with plants, I work with the energies of the earth. I'm an animist. So like looking at all these principles, you can kind of see how that energy expresses through you. So like pulling this Empress card, it's asking us to look at it as, how do we nurture our surroundings? How do we find comfort in our day-to-day, in our domain? What do we find beautiful? What do we value? And how is that represented in the 3D? And are you being kind to yourself with your thoughts? Are you being loving to yourself? Or are you isolating yourself with overthinking, with using logic and rational minded ways and planning and step-by-step perfectionism to express your will? Because we're talking about balancing the emotion with the logic. And that is a state we call the wise mind in mindfulness practices. Naturally, the card that represents this in the tarot is the King of Cups, Scorpio energies. He is both emotionally intelligent and logical at the same time, right? So, in order to master your emotions, you have to deal with them. The Empress has no problem expressing kindness, compassion. You really see that through the Queen of Cups aspect, right? Again, more receptive energies. So you can think of how you receive from other people, their values, and their way they express beauty in the world, and appreciating that beauty, because that's part of the Libran, Taurus, Venusian properties, okay? And we're not talking about shallow, like, wow, she's so fine. Wow, look at him. He is, okay? We are not talking about that, though that is the lower level, still positive, but, 3D versions of that aesthetic. What I'm talking about is, what beauty do you see in people's souls around you? How do people express their beautiful souls? How do you embody that? How do you execute that love for others by expressing your true beauty? What is it that makes you truly beautiful as a soul? Really think about it. And it doesn't matter if you're a dude or a chick or a they, them, or nothing. It doesn't matter. Energy is energy is energy in everything in our life. For the collective, I ask you, like, what do you want to build? What do you want to grow? What do you want to see flourish? How do you express your beautiful soul in this world? And remember, as within, so without. So whatever you invest in yourself, whatever, and yeah, self-care, sure, it can be surface level. It can be pampering yourself with beauty treatments or makeup or clothes or all those things. Or it can be values. It can be the way you think about life. It can be the way you express that to others. Because again, I'm thinking of the Libran air quality of Venus in this particular moment. Because as we're being challenged to go inward with Venus in Aries retrograde, I'm looking to the polar opposite sign to say, okay, what could we integrate when we come out of this retrograde to express more wholly, right? And since Taurus rules the throat chakra, how do we express that? How are we making the world a better place? It could be something as simple as being a musician and creating beautiful music, or speaking beautiful words, poetry, prose, or it's about how you show up in the world in that evolved energy. Because the Empress in reverse is the destruction of everything that has been built. You can sit around and speculate and like talk crap about people all day long, really get into the shadow of Gemini gossipy energies, and you can do that, but your outside is not going to represent your inside that way. You'll just keep attracting, and again, Venus is the planet of attraction, right? You'll keep attracting more gossip and more things to bitch about. So what are you spending your time speaking on? And if you're speaking on these lower level things, these negative things, or you're speaking to yourself in a negative way, like putting yourself down, how mindful of that are you? Like, are you aware that you're attracting people who are going to put you down, who are going to speak badly of you? When you speak badly of yourself, it's an energy. Yet again, what are you attracting? What are you putting out there? What are you putting in you? Like, if you want to get down to the nitty gritty earth energies, like, how are you eating? What are you ingesting? And also content. What are you consuming? How do you spend your time of leisure? Is it fulfilling you? These are all questions we could ask. What are you growing? What are you cultivating? Where are you trying to lead by example through higher principles of knowledge, like the Hierophant, the sibling card to the Empress, huh? Or who in your community can you talk to be uplifted into that energy? You know, some of you are Christian and you go to church. Some of you are Buddhist and you go inward. Some of you are like me, you're pagan freaks and you're all over the place. That's okay. However you speak to your guides, to your spirit tribe, to your ancestors, to whatever, sometimes it's in the physical community. You know, you want to talk about physical, like, people have become so complacent with virtual reality that I don't really see a lot of people actually physically communing with each other anymore. And that's okay. There's a level of convenience there, but ask yourself, how are you physically showing up for other people? How are you treating other people? How are you treating yourself? Do you have time for those leisurely activities? And you may say, what the hell is the point of this? Why? Everybody knows, yeah, self-care, whatever. It's like, do you really? Do you feel fulfilled in your life going day in and day out and barely being conscious because you have too much shit to do? Or are you in the present moment actually feeling the state of love? I've spent a lot of time alone in my life, and especially in the last couple of years, and I've gone through great transitions. And I can tell you that when you have no choice but to go inward and to speak kindly to yourself, you start to see your reality shift and bend, and you attract new experiences and new adventures. And while the retrograde is not an ideal time to go for new love or new relationships, it is a time to work on the relationships you have now. And people are like, oh, I don't want to work. Okay, then why are you still here? I don't even know how long we are in this video. This is half channel and half wisdom, like I said. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not going to do my typical Terra Mundi post on my Instagram like I usually do. I usually go into a brief channel and I curate and I make it look all pretty. I took a picture of the card. You're welcome to go check out my stories, but I think I'll link this video on my Instagram instead of creating my posts. So yeah, every week I do this thing called Tarot Moon Day. I pull a card or I do a spread for the collective. And this week I pulled the Empress card, and it is by the Earthcrafters Tarot, which is a phenomenal deck, by the way. And just for fun, if you're still here, feel free to leave a little star in the comments to let me know that you're still here and that you claim this concept. I don't know what you call it, concept of reading information. We're just going down the rabbit hole here, right? So, just for fun, I'm going to read the Earthcrafter Tarot by Letitia Guthrie. I'm going to read her definition here of the Empress. And I like her deck because it's got different plants to represent each different card. And this one is represented by Rose, which is appropriate, Venus. And the scientific name is Rosa species, at least in this book. And the mantra here is, Be vulnerable yet strong. Nurture love and compassion. See beauty and abundance in every stage of life. The description is, a honey-colored work table is covered in wild roses. Fall leaves are arranged in a crown. The seeds of fat, juicy rose hips spill out next to pink heart-shaped petals. Buds and flowers lie on a honeycomb. Red chilies from a triskel pointing to a flaming heart. A stone bead of the woman of Willendorf, a representation of the Great Mother, is strung onto a rosary. Healing the heart heals the world. Learn to be vulnerable yet strong, like the delicate petals of the rose protected by thorns. Roses uplift the spirit and inspire love. Embody sensuality in bold, vibrant ways. Let creativity and abundance flourish around and within you. Wild roses are prolific, creating food, medicine, and shelter for all who encounter them. As all parts of the rose contain medicine, every stage of your life finds passionate expression. Create, make, love, play. It is a fertile, generative time. So this is on page 16. The number 16 might be a synchronicity. In her book, the Empress is the third tarot card, which typically the Empress is the second card. Oh, wow. I'm just tripping up on this. Yeah, so anyways, that might be significant, those numbers. She has this neat little bit at the bottom that says crafting with the Empress. Arrange rose thorns and petals together on your altar to cultivate vulnerability and strength. Or create a rosary out of rosebuds, rose hips, or dried rose petal beads for love and compassion. Or celebrate the many stages of life by learning the remedies for each season of the rose. Rosebuds for childhood, full blooms for midlife, and hips for elderhood. Oh, wow. All right. I was going to pull some other cards, but I think we're going to leave it at that. I may post another video with the astro highlights for March, so keep an eye out for that. If I don't do a video, I will do an Instagram post with a meme. So thank you everyone who joined me here today. Thank you for appreciating my authentic style, my baby YouTube channel. I do appreciate the energetic exchange of the like button being tapped, of subscribing, commenting if you'd like. Again, drop a star if you're still here. Drop a rose if you're still here too. Then I know you really made it to the end. And until next time, I'm just going to leave it there. Thank you, darlings.